Hello everyone, my name is Abigail Harper, but please just call me Abby. I'm 35, living in Manhattan, and running an art appraisal company valued at $15 million. From the outside, it sounds glamorous, bright lights, high-profile clients, and an enviable life in the city that never sleeps. But the path to this point was anything but smooth. Behind the polished exterior lies a history I rarely share, one marked by silence, hurt, and a family who once made me feel invisible. For years, I carried the weight of being the forgotten one, the overlooked daughter who never seemed to measure up. That is, until last Thanksgiving when a long-buried secret was forced into the open, changing everything. This is my story, a tale of family drama, tears, and ultimately liberation. If it resonates with you, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to support my journey. If you're still listening, we want to sincerely thank you for spending your time with us. Truly means a lot. We'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments and let's see how far this message has reached. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, I highly recommend doing it now so you won't miss any of our upcoming stories. These aren't just ordinary stories, they're filled with meaningful life lessons that can inspire, teach, and stay with you long after the video ends. Hit that subscribe button and join our growing community. Part 1: An Invisible Childhood. I grew up in a narrow brick townhouse in Queens, New York, where every wall seemed to echo one name, Chloe. My younger sister arrived when I was 7, 2 months premature, fragile as a sparrow in winter. From that moment on, the world of my parents, Linda and Robert, shrank to the size of her crib. Our home became a fortress for her survival. Air purifiers humming in every room, bottles of medicine lined like soldiers in the kitchen cabinet, disinfectant wipes tucked into corners. And me? I became the contaminant, the unpredictable variable that might bring danger to their delicate child. If I sneezed, coughed, or even sniffled, the reaction was immediate. My mother would glance at me with alarm, as if my very breath was a weapon. My father's instructions followed swiftly. "Pack a bag, Abby. You're staying with Grandma Evelyn until Chloe feels better." I would watch as my overnight clothes were shoved into a plastic grocery bag, the door closing behind me before I could even wave goodbye. In those moments, it was hard not to believe that I was a stranger in my own home. I was the expendable one, the child they could send away. Chloe was the sun around which everything revolved, and I was a shadow they tolerated only when conditions were safe. And yet, there was one place where I didn't feel invisible: Grandma Evelyn's house on Long Island. Unlike the sterile, guarded air of Queens, her home breathed warmth and curiosity. She was an art collector, not in the wealthy museum-donating sense, but in the way of someone who simply adored beauty and history. Her walls were alive with paintings, her shelves crowded with bronze busts, delicate porcelain figures, and framed sketches collected over decades. I can still remember one rainy afternoon when I stood before a faded impressionist canvas of a garden. Grandma leaned close and whispered, "Do you see how the brush strokes shimmer? The artist wanted you to feel the sunlight even on a cloudy day." She pointed out every stroke, every hidden detail, guiding me to look beyond the obvious. 12 years old, when I won first prize in the statewide painting competition, I knew it was because she had taught me to see, not just to look. But at home, my victories evaporated into silence. The day of the award ceremony, my parents were absent, caught up in yet another round of Chloe's doctor visits. They didn't even ask how it went. Later, I overheard my mother telling a neighbor, "Abby's into some art thing, but Chloe had a rough week." That's what really matters. Pattern repeated itself year after year. When I was chosen as valedictorian of my high school class, I delivered my speech to a sea of parents cheering for their children. In the third row, 2 seats reserved with my family's name remained empty. I tried not to look at them, tried to believe it didn't matter, but I noticed every time the camera panned across the crowd. That night, I found out that Chloe had gone to Coney Island with friends, posting smiling pictures online. My parents had accompanied her because she had been too tired for the graduation. It was a cruel irony. Chloe was never too tired for amusement, only for the moments that belonged to me. By the time I was 15, Chloe had mastered the art of manipulation. She feigned migraines to skip school, dramatic sighs escaping her lips until my mother would rush to call the attendance office. She insisted on extensions for exams, on special allowances from teachers, on being excused from chores. And she always got them. My parents defended her like lawyers, insisting she was fragile, misunderstood, exceptional. Meanwhile, I learned self-reliance the hard way. I filled out scholarship applications in the dim light of my bedroom, the glow of the computer screen my only witness. I picked up shifts at a cafe near Flushing, pouring coffee for strangers to save for tuition. I wrote my own recommendation letters and begged teachers to sign them. I ironed my own clothes, learned to cook cheap meals, and kept a mental ledger of every dollar earned and spent. There were nights I lay awake, staring at the cracked ceiling above my bed, whispering to myself, "Abby, you don't need them. One day, you'll build something that no one can ignore." Still, the longing for recognition lingered like an ache I couldn't silence. I didn't want their money or their protection. I wanted their eyes to light up when they saw me walk into a room. I wanted my name to be spoken with pride, not as a footnote to Chloe's latest drama. But that pride never came. Instead, my parents wore exhaustion as a badge of honor, recounting Chloe's needs and struggles as if raising her were a noble crusade. Whenever I tried to share my achievements, the response was dismissive at best, hostile at worst. "Abby, can't you see we're dealing with something serious here? Your sister needs us. Don't make this about you." So I stopped trying. I withdrew into books, sketch pads, and the secret notebooks where I drafted plans for the life I would one day escape into. I pictured myself living in Manhattan, walking briskly in tailored suits, negotiating with art dealers in glass offices high above the streets. A world where my name mattered, where my work spoke louder than Chloe's fabricated ailments. Grandma Evelyn remained my anchor through it all. She reminded me again and again that I was more than the role assigned to me. "Invisible children grow into the strongest adults," she once told me as we sat sipping tea beneath her shelves of antiquities. "Because when no one claps for you, you learn to clap for yourself." I clung to those words, repeating them like a mantra during the loneliest nights. Looking back now, I see clearly how those years shaped me. They carved resilience into my bones, discipline into my habits, and a quiet fire into my heart. They also planted the seeds of bitterness, the kind that takes root when a child is denied the simple warmth of recognition. At 35, I can say with certainty, I built my empire from the ashes of neglect. My art appraisal company is worth $15 million, but its true value lies in the fact that it is mine, every inch of it carved out of solitude, perseverance, and the stubborn refusal to disappear. And yet, even with all that I have accomplished, the memory of being unseen still lingers. No empire, no recognition, no wealth can fully erase the sting of being the child who was never chosen. Because before the secrets, before the revelations, before the Thanksgiving that would unravel everything, I was simply Abby, the invisible sister in a house where Chloe was the only star. Part 2, A Silent Journey. Winning a full scholarship to Columbia University was more than just an academic milestone, it was my quiet rebellion. Art history became not just a major, but a refuge, a place where my invisible childhood could finally take form in something tangible, something respected. I still remember sitting in the marble halls of the university library, surrounded by centuries of knowledge, breathing in the musty scent of books and ink, feeling for the first time that I truly belonged somewhere. Graduation should have been a day of celebration. Columbia's commencement sprawled across the green lawns, students in caps and gowns tossing their tassels with joy. Families crowded the rows of chairs, cheering, waving banners, snapping photographs. I scanned the crowd, searching for familiar faces, for any sign of my parents or Chloe. But I already knew. They weren't there. Instead, they had driven Chloe to a casting call for a toothpaste commercial. I imagined them sitting in some waiting room, coaching her on how to smile, while my name was being called on stage without anyone from my family to hear it. I forced myself to walk across the stage with my head high, smiling for the strangers clapping politely. Inside, though, I felt that old sting of invisibility. Once again, my achievements had no audience at home. Till I refused to let it anchor me. After graduation, I landed a coveted position at one of Manhattan's most prestigious auction houses. From the outside, it sounded glamorous: crystal chandeliers, private showings, high society collectors. But the reality was quieter, lonelier, and far more meticulous. My days were filled with technical work, analyzing brushstrokes under magnifying glass, studying the yellowing of varnish, tracing the origin of frames, cataloging signatures, and cross-referencing archival records. Many evenings, I sat hunched over dusty paintings long after everyone else had gone home, running my fingers along the cracks of oil paint like a detective deciphering clues. And I loved it. There was a deep satisfaction in peeling back the layers of history hidden inside a canvas, in hearing the silent voices of artists long gone. Each artwork felt like a mystery entrusted to me alone, and I took that responsibility seriously. One case changed everything. A seemingly ordinary piece arrived, labeled as a reproduction of Monet. First glance, it appeared to be another copy, the kind that filled countless decorative living rooms. But something about the play of light on the water struck me as too alive, too masterful to be a mere imitation. I couldn't ignore it. I spent weeks buried in research, cross-checking every known Monet catalog, examining pigments under infrared light, and comparing microscopic details to verified works. The evidence whispered possibilities, but whispers weren't enough. I needed certainty. I convinced the auction house to send me to Paris to consult with a leading Monet scholar. I still remember standing in that quiet studio in the French capital, my heart pounding as the expert peered at the painting under a lamp. Minutes stretched like hours until he finally nodded, eyes alight. "This," he said softly, "is no copy. It is the lost Monet. Taken from a private collection during the war, missing for decades." Confirmation was electric. My body buzzed with adrenaline, disbelief, and awe. When the painting finally went to auction, it sold for $2.3 million. That night, as champagne glasses clinked around me, my supervisor, Mr. Thompson, pulled me aside. His gaze was sharper than ever before. "Abby," he said, "you have a rare gift. Don't waste it here. You were meant for more." Those words struck me like lightning. For so long, I had been accustomed to working in silence, unnoticed, like the invisible child I once was. But in that moment, someone finally saw me, not as Chloe's sister, not as a placeholder, but as a professional with extraordinary talent. It was enough to propel me forward. I scraped together every dollar I had saved, took out a terrifying loan, and signed the lease on a cramped office above a bakery on Bleecker Street. That was the birth of Harper Art Authentication. First months were brutal. Rent consumed most of my income. Instant noodles and black coffee became my staples. I worked until 3 in the morning, eyes stinging from fatigue, my hands trembling from too much caffeine. Fear was my constant companion, fear of failure, fear of debt, fear that maybe my parents had been right all along to overlook me. But slowly word spread. First, it was small-time collectors who couldn't afford the big firms. Then came a lawyer who trusted me with his client's estate. Then, to my astonishment, the wealthy circles of the Upper East Side began to call, discreetly asking for my expertise. My name was whispered in rooms I had never entered before. By the 3rd year, demand was overwhelming. I opened branches in Chicago and Los Angeles, building a team of specialists who shared my obsession with authenticity. Clients brought me works worth millions, trusting me to determine their fate with a single judgment. One wrong call could ruin reputations. One correct call could change history. The stakes were high, but I thrived on them. Company's revenue climbed, and soon our accounts crossed $15 million. I celebrated by buying a modest but elegant apartment in Tribeca. I drove an understated Audi, preferring discretion over ostentation. Outwardly, I had achieved everything I once dreamed of: independence, recognition, and financial security. And yet, in my family's eyes, I remained nothing more than Abby, the girl who works in an antique shop. Whenever I visited Queens, the conversations felt like knives dulled by routine. My parents still introduced me as the daughter who does something with old paintings. Chloe, by then pursuing acting and modeling gigs, mocked my work as dusty and boring. They never asked about the Monet discovery, about the company I built from scratch, about the millions in revenue or the international clients. For them, my life was a footnote, while Chloe's smallest additions became headline news at the dinner table. I told myself it didn't matter, that their blindness no longer defined me. But deep down, the old ache persisted. After everything, I still longed for acknowledgement that never came. It was a paradox I carried within me. I had built an empire out of invisibility, yet even in success, I remained unseen by the very people I once craved love from. Looking back, I realized that my silent journey was both punishment and blessing. Punishment because I endured years of hunger, debt, and emotional neglect. Blessing because every challenge sharpened me into someone who could stand on her own, unflinching, unbreakable. And though my parents may never recognize it, Harper Art Authentication became more than a company. Became my voice, my defiance, my proof that invisible children can leave indelible marks on the world. But all of that, every sacrifice, every triumph would eventually collide with a single night. Thanksgiving. The night my family finally saw me, though not in the way they expected. Part 3: Secrets and Silent Support. I chose to keep my success hidden, not out of shame, but out of self-preservation. I knew my family too well. If they discovered the scope of my achievements, they would twist it, diminish it, or worse, find a way to exploit it. Chloe, with her sharp tongue, never missed an opportunity to belittle me. She often laughed in my face, calling my work digging through old junk or dusting dead people's pictures. My mother, in her own subtle way, introduced me to friends as my daughter who does something with art, paintings, I think. The vagueness in her voice always stung more than outright cruelty. So I constructed a double life. By day, I was Abby Harper, founder and CEO of a thriving multimillion-dollar firm. By night, in the presence of my family, I became Abby, the struggling daughter, scraping by in an unglamorous job. It was safer that way. The less they knew, the less they could distort. But when whispers of their financial trouble reached me, my carefully built wall began to crack. I learned that my parents were drowning under the weight of Chloe's expenses: tuition at an expensive private university, endless medical bills, and the lifestyle adjustments they justified in the name of her fragility. Their mortgage payments slipped behind schedule. Credit cards maxed out. My mother's eyes carried new lines of worry whenever I visited, though she never asked me directly for help. And yet, I couldn't look away. For all the neglect, for all the years of invisibility, they were still my family. Against every bitter instinct, I felt compelled to protect them. So, quietly, I began to send money. $1,000 a month, wired from an anonymous account into theirs. I told them it was my modest savings from a low-paying job, that I was scraping together everything I could for their sake. They believed me. Of course they did. After all, in their eyes, I was still the underachieving daughter who made do while Chloe shined. They clucked their tongues sympathetically, praised my sacrifice, and continued to treat me as the small, struggling one. What they never knew was that the same week I sent that first transfer, I had authenticated a lost Picasso worth $5 million. My reality was one of high stakes and powerful clients, while the story I fed my family was one of quiet deprivation. Chloe benefited the most, though she never knew it was me. My money covered her tuition, her new car, her medical treatments. But instead of gratitude, she turned my sacrifice into her triumph. She strutted through life with the smugness of someone convinced the universe favored her. Designer handbags appeared on her arms, trips to the Maldives filled her Instagram feed, each photo captioned with hashtags like #blessed and #livingmybestlife. I watched from the sidelines, anonymous and invisible once again, as my own sister paraded my contributions as if they were rewards she had earned. In family gatherings, she boasted about her good luck and natural talent, while my parents beamed with pride. My mother even declared once, in front of relatives, "Chloe inspires this whole family. She shows us what resilience looks like." And then, in the same breath, she turned to me with a pitying smile. "And Abby, well, Abby has such a good heart. She sacrifices so much for us. Isn't she just the sweetest?" Sweet. That word burned more than an insult. It reduced me to a caricature, a soft-hearted, simple-minded caretaker whose only virtue was silent giving. Not successful. Not accomplished. Just sweet. I clenched my jaw, nodded, and stayed silent. 'Cause what could I say? That I was the reason the lights stayed on? That their precious Chloe's tuition, vacations, and luxuries were paid for by the daughter they dismissed? No. To reveal the truth would shatter the fragile balance I had built. So I laughed to myself instead. I treated it like an inside joke, a performance I had perfected. Let them believe I was selfless, sacrificial Abby. Let Chloe strut. Let my parents heap praise where it was least deserved. Meanwhile, I kept signing checks that held their world together, and no one knew the real cost. There were moments, though, when the bitterness pressed down on me with unbearable weight. Alone in my Tribeca apartment, I sometimes sat with a glass of wine in hand, staring out at the city lights, asking myself why I continued. Why give so much to people who had given me so little? Why keep saving them from consequences they had created? The answer was never simple. Part of it was guilt, the invisible child's desperate need to be noticed, even if anonymously. Part of it was pride, my refusal to let them crumble because their failure would feel like my own. And part of it, perhaps, was hope. Hope that one day they might see me, even if too late. But as the months turned into years, I came to accept the truth. My family didn't want to see me. They wanted the version of Abby they had always known, the shadow, the helper, the background figure who supported the star. Every time Chloe flaunted a new luxury on social media, I told myself it was worth it. Every time my parents praised her and patted me on the head, I whispered in my own mind, "If only you knew. If only you understood what I've built, what I've done for you." And yet, I never told them. I never broke the silence. I carried the weight alone, my secret becoming both armor and burden. Sometimes, in quiet moments, I wondered if my grandmother Evelyn would have scolded me for this. She once told me, "Invisible children can build their own empires, but beware of giving it all away to people who never saw you." Those words haunted me, but I couldn't undo the choice I had made. By the time Thanksgiving rolled around last year, I had sent nearly $500,000 to my family, disguised as humble sacrifice. They thought I was living in scarcity, but in reality, I was negotiating deals worth millions. Contrast was absurd, almost comical. Little did I know, the delicate mask I had worn for so long was about to crack. Secrets have a way of surfacing, especially when pride, envy, and family drama collide. And on that Thanksgiving night, in the middle of turkey, wine, and forced smiles, the truth I had kept buried would finally come to light. Part 4: The Thanksgiving Revelation. Thanksgiving last year was when everything finally erupted. My mother had been complaining for weeks about her back pain and how she couldn't stand for hours in the kitchen. Wanting to ease her burden, I offered to handle the meal. But rather than cooking, I hired a luxury catering service, the same team I often used for auction house galas in Soho. When the dishes arrived, the spread was breathtaking. Golden brown turkey glazed with garlic butter, creamy mashed potatoes infused with truffle oil, and a pumpkin pie so decadent it looked like it belonged in a Michelin-starred restaurant. Chloe, of course, couldn't resist sneering. She poked at her plate with her fork and smirked. "Abby, is this some kind of canned dinner?" Mom could do better in her sleep. I didn't rise to the bait. I just smiled faintly, knowing each plate in front of her cost more than the Gucci purse she'd flaunted on Instagram the week before. The evening might have passed in tense civility if not for my mistake. During dinner, I had to check in on an online auction in London, a Matisse painting I had authenticated, valued at over $3 million. I set my laptop up in my old bedroom, assuming I would return to close the session later. But in my exhaustion, I forgot to shut the screen. Chloe barged into the room without knocking, searching for a phone charger. That was her habit, entering spaces that weren't hers, claiming what she wanted without asking. This time, her intrusion unveiled everything. On my laptop screen glowed confidential company records, a business account with a balance of $15 million, a $500,000 appraisal contract, and quarterly profit statements showing more than $5 million in revenue. Her gasp echoed down the hall. Within seconds, she had snatched up the laptop, stormed into the dining room, and declared in a triumphant voice, "Look at this! Abby's been hiding millions from us." The room went silent. Forks froze in midair. My father looked bewildered. My mother chuckled, shaking her head as if Chloe had spun another tall tale. "Don't be ridiculous," she said. "Abby works at some antique shop. She doesn't have that kind of money." I rose from my seat, my hands steady even though my heart raced. "No, Mom. Chloe isn't lying this time. I own one of the top art authentication firms in the country. And I've been the one sending $8,000 every month to support this family." The words hung in the air like shards of glass. For a fleeting moment, I thought they might be proud. Instead, rage erupted. My mother slammed her palm against the table. "You've been sitting on millions while we've struggled? Do you know how many nights I've stayed awake worrying about Chloe's tuition, her medical bills?" Chloe's eyes filled with tears, though I knew they were crafted for performance. "You owe me, Abby. I've been sick my whole life. Don't I deserve something for all I've endured?" My father's voice turned sharp. "How selfish can you be? Family comes first. You should have told us." Something inside me snapped. All the years of invisibility, of swallowing pain, of being treated as second best, it came roaring to the surface. "Family?" I shouted. "What family? You sent me away every time I sneezed so Chloe wouldn't catch a cold. You skipped every milestone of my life, my art competition, my graduation, because Chloe wasn't feeling well. I paid for my own education. I built my own career. And now you demand I hand it all over because you think you're entitled?" Their faces blurred through my tears, but I didn't let my voice shake. I grabbed my laptop, slung my Hermes bag over my shoulder, the same bag my mother had once mocked as a cheap imitation, and walked out. Behind me, I could hear her voice rising, already plotting how they would use my money for Chloe's MBA and a new house in Florida. For once, I didn't turn back. Part 5: Consequences and Freedom. The days after Thanksgiving were a storm I hadn't anticipated. My phone lit up relentlessly, 53 missed calls, hundreds of texts. Chloe launched her campaign on Instagram, painting me as a traitor who had betrayed her family by hoarding wealth. My mother left voicemails demanding a trust fund of $3 million for Chloe and a beach house in Florida for her and Dad. Their sense of entitlement was staggering. They even showed up at my Manhattan office one afternoon, creating a scene in the lobby. Security escorted them out, but the humiliation burned. I knew then I had to draw a line that couldn't be crossed. My lawyer drafted a cease and desist letter warning of legal action if the harassment continued. That finally silenced them. The only voice of comfort came from my grandmother, Evelyn. Over tea in her quiet Long Island home, she clasped my hand and whispered, "You did the right thing, Abby. You've given enough. Now it's time you live for yourself." Her words lifted the weight that had pressed on me for decades. I moved into a new apartment on the Upper West Side, a place with tall windows and quiet streets where I could breathe. I changed my number, upgraded my security system, and refocused on my work. Business flourished, clients admired my discretion, my precision, and my refusal to be dazzled by fame. For the first time, I wasn't hiding. Meanwhile, Chloe tried to imitate me. She announced the launch of her own art consulting business, but without knowledge, discipline, or credibility, it crumbled within months. My parents claimed they no longer needed my money, but whispers reached me that they were drowning in debt. I no longer felt the old tug of guilt. Their choices were theirs to bear. Now, when I look at my life, I see freedom where chains once were. I no longer dread family dinners that leave me hollow. I no longer conceal my success to make others comfortable. I live openly, authentically, and unapologetically. And the truth? That is worth more than $15 million. Thank you for listening to my story. If it moved you, please like, share, and subscribe, because sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is tell the truth and finally set ourselves free.